Hello, welcome to the show. Welcome to Not Just Nintendo, a video game podcast that is about Nintendo, but it's not just Nintendo here at Not Just Nintendo, as I talk about other video games as well. Welcome to the show, everyone. Welcome to episode 25. 25, it's a pretty good number. This is actually a special episode for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, 25, it's a quarter of 100, right? 25 is a pretty good round number. I think anything that's a multiple of 5 is a pretty nice number. Any even 10s are obviously even better. Um, Really, yeah, I think those are the best numbers is when you have an even 5 and even 10, obviously. But anyway, so 25 is pretty cool for that reason. But 25 is also cool for another reason, and that's that. As you know, last episode was 2 weeks ago because I officially moved or changed the scheduling of the podcast so that from now on, starting from I guess last episode because there was a 2 week break. Each episode will come out every 2 weeks. Now I don't know if I actually addressed that in the last podcast episode because it's been a little bit of a while now. Because again, it's been 2 weeks, right? It's actually been 15 days. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, so it's 2 weeks, so it's a longer time in between episodes now for those who didn't already hear about this previously. But I decided to make that change because it felt like with the podcast episodes, especially here lately, I've just been struggling to find things to talk about, and it gets to the point where it's a bit of fluff, and I don't necessarily want to talk about news and stuff every episode. I feel like there should be some episodes here and there where we just forego the news because I have so much to talk about. I want to have so many things to talk about that I struggle to fit it into an hour and a half. And if that happens, I can either make a longer episode if I have the time, or I can save ideas for next time, right? And then I'll never run out of ideas. That's the idea, right? So, I'm not somebody who has like tons and tons of time, you know what I mean? Especially, it comes in waves, sometimes I'll have lots of time, sometimes I won't. And so, especially recently, I haven't due to some expected and unexpected circumstances. And so because I felt that, the podcast episodes were getting both shorter and, having more fluff, making them ultimately worse, I didn't want the episodes to just continually be getting worse, so I decided to make the change to make them every 2 weeks, with the idea being that it would, first of all, allow me to make other videos, right? More, and now I know it has been 2 weeks since the last video. I know, again, busy time, busy time. This week's pretty rough. But next week I'm gonna definitely work on some stuff. I'm actually thinking they're probably, I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm not gonna promise a video next week. Actually, I will say there will probably be a video, if not next week, the week after. How about that? I think there'll be something in the next 2 weeks. So I know it's still a bit off potentially. Things are just things are a bit weird right now. So I'm still trying to figure some things out. Obviously, the summer's winding down, and then school's on, marching band's already on, so it is a lot of stuff going on. So bear with me here. I need to go back to do some live streams again. It's been forever since I've live streamed. And there's something I'll talk about in a minute here. So I mentioned that it had been 15 days rather than 14, and for the viewers that are above the age of 3, you'll know that 15 days is more than 2 weeks, right? So basically what happened, and I did post in the community tab on YouTube and also over on Discord. If you didn't see that, then I guess that means you got to join the Discord, link in the description. Or you can, subscribe to the YouTube channel right here. And so you can get those updates. But anyway, so I did post around that it was getting delayed. I did not expect that. That's why it was so last minute that it was getting delayed. But things came up, and I'm not gonna really get into it. But anyways, the point is, I was like, let's just delay it a day. It's really not a big deal. So, episode it's a bit weird because I've made 2 changes like very recently on the podcast in the last couple of episodes. The first one moving it to Tuesday instead of Wednesday, and then the second one making it every 2 weeks. And actually, both of those things are now not true for this episode, even though the change was just made. And that's a little weird. That's like, having something regularly scheduled on a day and then changing the day, but then the first week, that on the new day, it's back to the old day. Like, I know I'm causing some confusion here, so I apologize. But moving forward, unless, of course, something else comes up, the plan is every other Tuesday at about 5 p.m. So, this one's on Wednesday instead. But it should be Tuesday in the future, and it'll be every 2 weeks. I am considering, in the event that I have enough to talk about that I feel like I can do an episode in after just a week. I'm kind of debating. I'm trying to think, but like, should I number it as the next episode? Like, if I do, 42, and then 2 weeks later I do 43, 2 weeks later I do 44, but then it's only a week till 45. Is it 45, or should I just call it a bonus episode and then do 45 after another week? Like, I'm not really sure. So if you have any input on that, you can, I don't know, I guess you can email into the show. And also, if you have any questions or anything for me to answer, you can also email into the show. That's notjustnintendo@gmail.com, NOTJUSTNINTENDO@gmail.com. Figured I'd get that out of the way at the beginning while everyone's still here. But anyway, so the podcast got moved, the podcast got delayed, all sorts of stuff. Most of you guys probably know that because oh, it's Wednesday. Who would have thought, right? But anyways, so that's kind of where we're at. Like I said, hopefully we can have some videos out soon. But let's get enough of the preamble. I think we've had enough of the preamble here. Let's get into talking about some video games because video games, they're pretty cool. So the general layout of today's show, I think it's a little bit more organized than most. I'm gonna talk a little bit about one game in particular, and honestly, I think just the one game. I don't think I've played anything else in the last 2 weeks. Just the one, and I've played quite a bit of the one. And then, well, I shouldn't say I haven't played anything else because I also played just a little bit of the Drag and Drive Global Jam thing. So I'll be talking about that. Drag and Drive is actually coming out tomorrow when you're seeing this. For me, it's another 2 days, but it's pretty soon. So yeah, you guys, when you guys are seeing this, Drag and Drive comes out tomorrow. I'm considering picking up Drag and Drive, probably not on launch day. It's a digital only thing, which really frustrates me. I would have loved if they've done like a physical release for it. Honestly, they could have put it out for 10 more, $30 instead. I still would have bought it. I mean, I know it's more expensive. So that's the thing. People are like, "Oh, well, it's more expensive for them to, put out a physical game." I'm like, "Okay, great. I'll pay the cost." Because at the end of the day, it's really not that much more expensive. I mean, like, we talk about like a general $60 game, they make, I mean, it's not actually $60, but we'll just say, for conversation's sake, if they make the $60 off, the physical game or off the digital games, what are they making? 59.80 off the physical ones, 59.90 maybe. I mean, like, surely these plastic cases in the amounts that they buy them and they produce them, surely it's not that big a deal. And of course, the shipping and all that, but still, I mean, surely, and the magnitude that they do it, it's really like, I mean, I don't know, maybe $1? It can't be more than $1 a game. It's got to be like 10 cents or 20 cents or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm off, but I mean, even still, if you want to charge me like $5 more for a physical game, that's probably more than you need just to cover the cost of that game. I mean, it's probably way more actually. So, you know what? Charge me 10. Honestly, I'd pay 10 more for most things if I could get them physical. I would have happily, maybe not happily, but I would have paid 80 for Bonanza instead. Well, I guess I did get the physical for Bonanza. But I guess my point is if Bonanza was going to be digital only, but you could buy it for 10 more physically, I would have done it. Or Drag and Drive, right? I'll probably buy it for 20, but I definitely would have bought it for 30 if they had put it out physically, and then they would have made more money. They would have made more money. And I know there's other people in my position, probably not a ton, but enough that it's like, why not, right? Why not? Just, anyway, enough of that. But again, like I said, I did play just a little bit of Drag and Drive. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I'll talk about it, and I'll talk about the general audience reaction, stuff I've seen online, like how other people were feeling about it. I'll talk about that as well, so we'll get into that. But first of all, we need to talk about that other game that I was alluding to, and that, of course, is Donkey Kong Bananza. You probably all guessed it. And just get it out of the way, get the elephant or the ape out of the room. I still have not beat Donkey Kong Bonanza. I know, like I said, I've been a little busy. I'm also slow, I know this is probably something, if you're a regular listener of the podcast, you probably have noticed. I do play a lot of games, but I like to play a lot of games at once. And when something new comes out, I will sometimes jump on it. But even when I do, I generally, I'm not like just like boom, let's get this thing out of the way, let's get it done, boom, boom, pow, we're done, right? Like usually I'm playing other stuff at the same time, old stuff, usually just old stuff. I don't hit everything new. I don't get every new game. There's a lot of things that I skip out on, or maybe I want them, and I'm like, yeah, but you know what? This is just a lot coming going out, and I'm just gonna worry about it some other time. That's just how I go with a lot of things. Nintendo first party stuff is the stuff that I tend to be around for at the beginning, but even still, I miss a lot of it. So I don't know. Bonanza though I had to be there day one for, and I had played quite a lot of it. I'm actually up to 30 hours now on Bonanza. So I think last time I had played like 14 or so, I think about 14 hours. Now I'm about 30 hours into Donkey Kong Bonanza, and I guess I guess I have a hard time talking about Donkey Kong Bonanza because I love the game. I think it's a fantastic game. Had it come out a couple of months ago, or had my top 50 come out a couple of months from now, Bonanza definitely would have been on my top 50 games of all time list. And it probably would have been very high. I mean, honestly, it might have been in the top 10. I mean, it's that amazing. Maybe over time, maybe I'll begin to, sour on it, but that's okay. Sometimes, I think sometimes when people are making their own personal lists, their top 10s, their top 50s, their top, 10,433s, whatever it is, oftentimes, they'll get too caught up in the idea that, like, oh, I played this game too recently, I don't want to have recency bias, I can't be putting it. You'll have it like a thought. You're like, okay, this game's got to be in the top 10. But then you're like, you know what? I just played that a month ago. Surely I can't put it in the top 10 because maybe it's actually not as good as I'm thinking. There's that kind of feeling that a lot of people have. And honestly, I don't think that makes much sense. Because at the end of the day, my top 50 list was a snapshot in time of how I was feeling about my favorite 50 games at that moment. And since then, there's already been things that I'm like, oh shoot, maybe that should have been higher, or maybe that should have been lower, or maybe that should have been on the list, maybe that should have been off the list. I've already had those thoughts. The day I put it out, literally the day I put out that top 50, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should have swapped out Mario and Luigi Brothership for Assassin's Creed and put Brothership on 50. And because it was off the list before, I was like, maybe I should have put it on the list. And then that same day, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should have put Mario RPG up at like 12 instead of 14 or whatever, So just over time, I did just more and more things. A week later, I was like, does Kirby's Adventure really belong at number 7? Like just all the time. There's always something else. Bowser's Fury. I was like, maybe I put Bowser's Fury too low. But there's always going to be something, and I think it's a really good thing to have that snapshot in time of how I'm feeling. So, when I make another top 50, whether it's in a year, whether it's in 2 years, whether it's in, 74 years, whatever it is, Bonanza will be up there, I imagine. I mean, I don't, maybe not in 74 years, who knows? But in a year or two, I imagine Bonanza will be very high up there, and lots of things will fall off, and lots of things will come back on, and there's going to be a lot of change, obviously. And that's okay, and I think that's a great thing. Something like Persona 3 Reload, right? I had just played that. I beat it in April, like early April. I made the top 50 in July, right? July? Yeah, July 4th that came out. So it really hadn't been that long. It only been a few months. And I put that game very high, like 14, And in maybe in a year or two, when I've played more games and stuff, I'll be like, you know what? That can't be a 14, So that's the kind of those are the kinds of opinions that change over time. And Bonanza may end up being that same way. Maybe Bonanza in a couple of years, I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not quite as good as I thought it was. I mean, when I first played Odyssey, I loved Odyssey. I thought it was fantastic. I was like, man, this is so cool. I love the way Mario controls. It's a return to Mario 64, right? But then, I tried to replay it just like a month or two later after I had first played it, and I was like, you know what? This is nothing like Mario 64. Because the moons, it just felt. I've talked about this so much. I mean, honestly, I need to just like. I've banned complaining about Mario Kart World for the most part. I've not banned complaining about Xbox, but I've tried to limit it. Odyssey is gonna have to go in that same category. I'm gonna have to ban complaining about both Mario Kart World and Mario Odyssey. And probably Breath of the Wild as well. Those are 3 games I talk about all the time about how they're not. I don't love them as much as Mario Kart World is already divisive, right? Odyssey most people love, and Breath of the Wild many people consider to be the best game of all time. And so there's three different layers there, but all three of them, I have a pretty negative opinion of, and I know other people that have very positive opinions of. And all three of those games, they're good games, right? They're pretty solid games. Honestly, no, they're all good games. They're all good games. I would say Breath of the Wild is the best of the three. Yeah, they're all good games. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I guess my point is, you know, Odyssey, I loved Odyssey for the first couple of months, and I beat it, and I got a bunch of extra moons, but then as soon as I tried to go back, I realized that it wasn't super replayable. And a 3D Mario game has to be replayable in my eyes, because, personally, I don't play a 3D Mario game to not 100% it, with like a couple exceptions. 3D World, I don't have to beat every level with 5 characters, because that's stupid, but I still get every green star, and I still get every stamp. And in Mario Galaxy, I don't beat the game twice, once with Luigi, because that's stupid. I just do 120 stars with Mario. And then, of course, Odyssey is the other exception, which, to be fair, I don't replay Odyssey much, because I don't like it very much. But that's the other one that, again, I won't get all 999 moons, because that's ridiculous. So, but generally speaking, I replay Mario 64 probably 3 or 4 times at least every year. And every time I replay Mario 64, I get all 120 stars. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Sometimes I'll start playing Mario 64 and I'll get away from a playthrough, but I never beat the game with less than 120 stars. That's just not something I do, because, every single time I'll play through the game, I get 119 stars, and then I go to Bowser, and I get the red coins while I'm there, So every single time I have 120 stars when I beat the game, unless I'm doing some sort of like challenge, or I'm trying to, I tried to do a speed run for 0 stars, and it didn't really work out. I did successfully do a 16-star run years ago, but anyways, my point is, when I actually just play the game for the sake of playing the game, I get 120 stars every single time. And Sunshine is the same way. I've only done it a few times, but I've gotten all 120 shines each time I've done it. Galaxy, same way. I've gotten 120 stars. Actually, years and years ago, when I first beat Galaxy, I did it with like 110 or something. But every time since then, I've done 120. Galaxy 2, I got all 242, but I've only beat that. Is it 242? Something like that. But I've only beat it the one time. Or I've only 100%ed it the one time, I should say. Actually, I've also only beat it the one time. 3D Land, I don't think I've ever 100%ed 3D Land, actually, because I don't really like it that much either. But if I was going to, I would beat every level with Mario and Luigi in the top of the flagpole and all 3 comet medals or star medals or whatever they're called. And for 3D World, I get all the stamps, all the green stars, top of the flag with every, or not with every character, but with every board. So, in Bowser's Fury, I got all 100 cat shines. So, that's how 3D Mario games are, as far as I'm concerned. You don't play a 3D Mario with the possible exception of Odyssey, without getting everything, because honestly, I just think that's the point of the game. I'm not judging you if this is what you do. Well, I am judging you. If you beat Mario 64 with 70 stars, and you're not like a speedrunner or something. Like, if you literally just play the game for fun and you only get like 70 stars, I don't think you're playing the game properly. Like, honestly, I know that sounds weird to say, and maybe it sounds a little like egotistical, like, well, I'm playing the game the right way and you're wrong. But like, really, I honestly and truly, and I've had debated with some people on this, I really think the designers of Mario 64 and every 3D Mario game moving forward, with, again, maybe the exception of Odyssey, I think they intended for you to get everything. And they had to put something lower, like a lower bar, in there, so that people that couldn't get everything could actually get through the game, or people that didn't care to get everything could get through the game, and they could widen the audience. But really, I think at the end of the day, they were really hoping that you got 120 stars. And, maybe, I don't know, maybe they were going to make you get 120 stars, and then somebody at Nintendo was like, maybe we should put in a, something lower. But I don't know, maybe this is all speculation. I mean, this is all speculation. Maybe it's all untrue. I don't care. At the end of the day, that's how I play the game. That's how I feel the game should be played. And I will judge you if you play it otherwise. But I guess what I'm getting at, because I've been yapping and rambling, is that Donkey Kong Bananza, maybe when I try to replay it, I'll have the same opinion. I don't know. I mean, there is a lot of stuff to get. Not all of it feels totally useful, which is kind of part of the problem I have with Odyssey, but it's definitely more useful. I guess the fossils are equally not useful as the purple coins from Odyssey. But the Bananium gems, are much more useful than the moons, I would say. Well, I guess it's kind of it's subjective because at the end of the day, you need the moons in Odyssey to progress in the game, and you need the bananas in Bonanza to get abilities. So you couldn't really beat Odyssey without getting moons regularly. I mean, maybe there's a way, but if you're normally playing the game, you couldn't get Odyssey. Without getting moons, but you could beat Bonanza without getting bananas. But still, it feels like the bananas are more of a reward. Every 5 you get a skill point. So there's at least, I think, more reason besides just the sake of beating the game. I feel that there's actually more reason. It's more tangible with Bonanza, and that's part of what I like about Bonanza. But again, maybe when I try to go back to it, which I'm sure I will, probably next year, there's a good chance that I will, my opinion will sour, or I mean, I want to say there's a good chance. There's a chance that my opinion could sour a little bit, but I still feel that I'll always appreciate it more than Odyssey. I definitely got caught up in the hype with Bonanza. I was like, counting down the days for it to come out. I mean, like, honestly, like that April the 2nd, Switch 2 presentation was pretty cool. I wasn't like, well, no, I was kind of giddy. I wasn't giddy, but honestly, yeah, I was kind of giddy about it. It was pretty awesome. But Bonanza was the best thing in that presentation by far. I mean, other than like the hardware stuff, I guess, like seeing the mouse controls and all these things, that was pretty cool too. But really, the Bonanza was the highlight of that presentation, and I don't think most people would argue against that. I think most people would probably agree that Bonanza was the highlight, or maybe Metroid Prime 4, depending on who you are, right? I could see a couple possibilities there, but at the end of the day, for me, Bonanza is the highlight, and again, maybe my opinion will change on Bonanza, but so far, I'm loving it, and I'll have beat it very soon. I don't know if I mentioned, I'm very close to the end of the game. I actually had to look up how many main areas there are in Bonanza, um, and they're marked as layers. In Odyssey, you had kingdoms, right? And there was I don't know how many kingdoms there were. There were quite a few. In Bonanza, there's layers instead, and each layer has a few sub layers. But they stick to the same theme, or at least a similar theme. They might change a little bit, but it's generally the same area. You see the same people. I mean, or zebras or whatever, whatever it is in that area. Um, and so I went through and I looked up, and apparently there are 16 main areas, including the last one, which is it's the bottom layer. I don't. Well, I don't think it's really a spoiler. The blast one's the planet core, and I assume that's where you fight the final boss. Um, but other than that one, there's 15 layers, and I'm on the 14th of those 15. So if that kind of puts it into perspective, I'm about halfway through the second to last layer before the final boss. Because I don't know, maybe there is something to do on the planet core. Honestly, there might be something like the Moon Cave from Odyssey, or something like the Perfect Run, or something like Champion's Road. There might be something like that. I would honestly love if there was something like that. So I really hope there is. But I guess something like that would be a little bit more difficult to do in a game like Bonanza than it is in a game like Odyssey or Galaxy 2 or 3D World. It just doesn't really seem like it's as well suited for it. But I'm sure they could figure something out. Again, I haven't really seen much about anything with the end of Bonanza, so I don't know. I could just be making stuff up. Maybe they did do that. Maybe they didn't do that. I don't know. But whatever it is, I'm hoping for something like that. That would be great. So we'll see what happens. I shouldn't really get too speculative, although, knowing me, right? But yeah, so I played tons of Bonanza. I'm at 30 hours of Bonanza now. That is pretty awesome. I'm really still absolutely loving Bonanza. I believe I've unlocked all of the Bonanza abilities, all the different animals you can turn into. And I've got to say, for me, I think the elephant is the most useful. Generally, if I'm going to use one, I'm probably going to use the elephant. The one I find myself using the least is definitely the zebra. The zebra doesn't seem quite as useful. There's obviously specific circumstances and situations where you do need to use the zebra. Sometimes they force you into it. I mean, they do this for a lot of things, right? There's specific areas where you specifically have to use the zebra, or the snake sometimes, or The ostrich they do sometimes. They kind of lock you off to specific ones sometimes, but generally speaking, if I'm not stuck between one, I'll usually use either the Kong Bonanza because it can break through um, that like super tough metal or concrete or whatever it is, can break through that really easily, or the Elephant Bonanza because it seems like the most useful for breaking stuff, right? I mean, I guess you're not really breaking stuff, you're sucking stuff up, but still. um and I've got to say, it is really funny now. We've seen Mario as an elephant and a Donkey Kong as an elephant, so I don't know who's next, but clearly Nintendo's trying to make all their characters into elephants. So I mean, I'm down. I'm down to see like Link as an elephant in the next Zelda game, but anyways. Yeah, I've common complaints about Bonanza. I heard some people complaining about how the theming of the worlds doesn't make a ton of sense, and that maybe they should have been reorganized. And so certain worlds should have been earlier on in the game, and the certain ones should have been later on, um, based on the progression to not make you feel bored. And I I disagree, to be honest. I think generally speaking, I don't think it matters too much what order these boards are in, because honestly, I think they're all pretty cool. I don't think there's a world per se that I was like disappointed with completely. I mean, a little bit. I will say the very first one, besides the tutorial area, I got to the very first one, and I was liking the game, and was it the first one? Wait, was it the first one? I think it was the first one. It was like there was an area on land, and then below it there was water that rose up, and there were some platforms in the water. That area I really didn't love too much. I'm not sure if that was the first or second area now that I think about it, but anyways, but just about every other layer, there's a couple areas that are like not all that much, not all that involved. Like, there's one that's called the Divide, and it's really just an area, where you can pick which world you go to next. And it's just like an Odyssey, where you'd be on the map going to different worlds, and you had to stop and choose between the wooded and the snow kingdoms. It's exactly like that, or like between the seaside and the luncheon. Is luncheon the other one you can choose from there? I don't know, but anyways, from those kingdoms, it's just like that, except this time you actually go to an area to make your choice. You don't just do it in a menu, which is cool, I guess. And I'm glad that the Divide is there, but it feels a little weird to count that as an area here. So I don't know, but anyways, I guess my point is, most of the worlds were well themed, and I really did enjoy the theming on just about all of them. I don't think I saw any complaints for any specific areas. I think for me, my favorite one so far was probably the resort layer. That was pretty nice. I liked the resort layer. Let's see. I also liked the racing layer quite a bit, but that one, it's very short. There's not a whole lot going on. So I think those were probably my two favorite. The hilltop layer was also pretty cool. So there were a few that stuck out to me, but honestly, again, there weren't any that I really didn't like. Well, except like I said, the lagoon layer I didn't love. It wasn't amazing. It was fine, whatever. The forest layer didn't really get me. I thought it was fine, but I wasn't like overjoyed to be there. And then so far the feast layer isn't quite doing it for me either. I know the feast layer is kind of similar to like Luncheon Kingdom from Odyssey, but I don't think it's quite as interesting. And also the forest layer is a lot like Wooded Kingdom from Odyssey, but also I don't think it's as interesting. So I don't think they did quite as well with the theming as they did in Odyssey. I think that is one thing Odyssey has over Bonanza. I think Odyssey had better themes for the worlds, but for me, it's not a problem what order they're arranged in. I don't care. I do kind of wish they hadn't started with the Lagoon layer, because I just didn't love it very much, but I kind of wish they would have started with something else. But other than that, it really hasn't bothered me at all, really. The pacing of the layers. I agree that maybe some of the shorter ones were bunched up, which is probably not the smartest move, but again, it didn't bother me that much. I was totally fine. Like, I didn't care too much. It is what it is. So that's kind of where I am with that. So, at the end of the day, Bonanza is fantastic. There are some mechanics specifically that I really, that I really, really loved. I mean, I know here towards the end of the game, I think it first showed up in the resort layers. I say towards the end of the game, it's actually only like halfway through. There was one mechanic that I particularly loved, and I'm not sure if anybody else had the same opinion. But in Bonanza, there's obviously the ability where you can pick up chunks off the ground, and you can do quite a bit with that with those chunks. You know, some of them, well, any of them really, you can throw at enemies. You can throw them at other pieces of terrain and break them. You can swing them at other pieces of terrain and do more damage. You can ride on them. You can like surf on them is what they call it, turf surfing. There's a lot of things you can do, but you can also do the chunk jump. And the chunk jump, it's like a little double jump you can do, and that's pretty useful. I didn't get it right away. It was in the little skill tree, and I was focused more on my punching power and stuff earlier on in the game, before I got stuff like the chunk jump. But there was, specifically in the resort layer, and they do use it in a few layers after that. I know they use it at least in the I think in the Radiance layer they use it a little bit. In the Feast layer they use it a little bit. They use it in quite a few, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. They use it quite a bit. But anyways, it's called the Liftoff Ore. And it's this, it's a piece of terrain, and it's a rainbow. And you pick it up, and you literally lift off the ground, and you fly high in the sky. And it reminded me a lot in the resort layer. It reminded me a lot of Super Mario Odyssey because, and obviously it's the same team and everything, so it makes sense. But the resort layer is inherently very similar to the seaside kingdom in Super Mario Odyssey. And there was the capture in Odyssey called the Gushin, I believe it was the Gushin, and you could capture him, and he was like a purple squid in a blue like water sphere. I don't know. And you could basically fly for a short period of time, and you could shoot the water up, or you could shoot the water down at the ground to fly up, or you could shoot it to the sides to move to the opposite side. And a lot of people loved the Gushin from Odyssey because it was a really useful thing for traversal in that one specific world, and it felt like the world was very well built for it. And the general structure of the Seaside Kingdom in Odyssey is that there's a kind of like an island. There's around the outside, there's some stuff, some moons and some mini games and all sorts of stuff. But then in the middle, there's a big glass that you end up going and fighting like the boss in or whatever. I don't remember all the details, but anyways, there's like a big area, and that's kind of it's in the center of the kingdom, right? And Bonanza was very similar because it also had a seaside sort of layer. It was called the resort layer, but it was a similar idea. And it also had some NPCs and stuff on an outer land, except it went all the way around in a circle this time. But then in the middle, rather than there being a large glass, there was a large watermelon, which was kind of funny. And so you actually have to scale, up the level to get to the watermelon, and it's in the watermelon that you fight the boss. So that was pretty cool. There were definitely, that was definitely a really fun time. I would say personally, I think that was probably the peak of the game. Well, maybe not the peak of the game, because honestly, I think it's been pretty strong since as well. I don't know if it was the peak of the game. I think it was one of the high moments for me, was scaling up that watermelon, and I really just, I don't know, something about it was really, really fun. I mean, it was just plain fun. There are these like shark enemies that can, they just kind of walk around on the water, or sometimes even on the land for some reason. And if you punch them, it goes in the opposite direction, and it'll shoot like a bridge of this liftoff ore. And it's a rainbow bridge, and it'll go pretty far. It goes pretty high up, and then it comes back down to the other side, and so you can get some height with it by just walking up the bridge. But also, when you get to the top of the bridge, you can grab the liftoff ore and fly a little higher as well. And so that's how you're supposed to get to some of the higher areas and ultimately scale the watermelon. So that was definitely a fun thing to do. And yeah, I think that was honestly one of my favorite moments of the game, was just flying high through the sky on my way to scale this watermelon with Donkey Kong. I mean, it was the most ridiculous and one of the most fun moments in the game. And, honestly, there's just a lot of that Nintendo charm and Nintendo energy in this game. It's great. I really do. I really do love it. It's fantastic. So, honestly, that's kind of where I am in this game. It's a great game. There's a lot of fun stuff, fun charm. I love, so in Odyssey, right, there were the sub areas. You would go through a door or a pipe or something, and you go to a secondary level where there was a challenge to get a moon at the end. There's that same kind of thing in Bonanza with a banana coin instead. Not a banana coin, Bananium gem. Um, but there's a few different versions of those like sub areas, just like there were in Odyssey. So there's one where it's like an enemy defeating sub area. And with those, it's, as it sounds. It's not what it's called, but it's as it sounds. You'll enter one, and you'll have like 30 seconds, and you've got to go kill a bunch of enemies. And usually it's pretty easy. It's honestly not the most interesting of the possible sub areas. You'll just go in there, and you're like, all right, quick, let's go kill this enemy, kill this enemy, kill this enemy. Boom, I'm done. Get my banana gem or whatever, and call it a day. So those are cool, but then what's really, I think, more entertaining are the sub-areas where you actually have to complete a platforming segment, because that's part of the thing with Bonanza. I think this was kind of an issue in Odyssey too, but I think it's actually a bigger issue in Bonanza, and that's that the actual platforming isn't really there in Bonanza. Like, generally, it is a platformer, but it's almost more of an exploration game, and it's also kind of a destruction sim, so it seems to kind of drift away a little bit from a platformer. There's not really a ton of platforming going on. I guess the only reason it is still a platformer, first of all, it's a 3D platformer because it's a collectathon, and second of all, because the movement feels like a platformer. I will say, Donkey Kong's moveset isn't quite as versatile as Mario's for Mario Odyssey, but I still very much like it, and I almost think it's more limited, and that's almost good in a way, because it means that you have to rely more on, sometimes there'll be many times in Bonanza where I'll have to, like, create a bridge out of things I find on the ground. I'll have to pick up a chunk of something and throw it at a wall and make it stick if I get a soft material, and I'll make a bridge to get up on high areas. Like, that's just something I do just all the time, because, it's just, it works well, and, Donkey Kong can't get a ton of distance, and he can't get a ton of height, because he's just not as versatile as Mario, and I think that's fine. I think that's a really good way of doing it, but I guess my point is generally there's not a ton of platforming going on in Bonanza, so it's really nice when there are these sub areas where there is platforming going on. And I think that's, most of those sub areas that aren't there for enemies are, like, platforming challenge based. Not everything, but most of them. And some of them are actually in 2D, as if they were Donkey Kong Country levels. And I definitely liked that. In fact, a few of them were actually, like, almost remakes of Donkey Kong Country levels. I don't think any of them were, like, specifically the exact same as a Donkey Kong Country level, but they were, like, they were built with some of the same, philosophies and similar ways, right? I mean, you could clearly see the influence. I think one of them was even called, like, Nostalgia Country or something like that. And so, I definitely appreciated doing that as somebody who loves the Donkey Kong Country games. If you didn't watch my top 50 video, out of the 5 Donkey Kong Country games, 4 of them made it on my top 50. And Tropical Freeze was number 6, just barely scraped out of the top 5. So yeah, I definitely am a big fan of Donkey Kong Country, and I'm a big fan of 3D Mario, so this was kind of a nice blend for me, Bonanza. It was a pretty perfect, perfect combo. And so, it's sub areas like that where there is some tight platforming that I do appreciate, because, I am quite good at platforming. Specifically 2D platforming, I think, but I'm still pretty good at 3D platform. I don't know, maybe I'm pretty equal at both, actually. But I'm pretty good at platforming, and so I definitely like me some platforming challenges and a platformer. Some other of my favorite platformers that aren't like Mario or Donkey Kong are like Crash Bandicoot, right? And Crash Bandicoot is a little bit more focused on the platforming and a lot less about the collectibles and stuff. So they're definitely different styles of 3D platformers, but I like both styles. And so I kind of like when something like Bonanza does a little bit of both, right? So that's definitely nice. So yeah, I definitely liked the sub areas where you killed enemies. I liked the sub areas where you did platforming stuff. And overall, I think I probably prefer those platforming ones just a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the sub areas were nice. The worlds themselves, the theming of the worlds was nice. I mean, as far as like story stuff, Bonanza's not really at its strongest with its story. And I don't really think anybody's really there for the story. I mean, if you're coming to play Bonanza for the story, you're playing the wrong game, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're playing the wrong game. So, Bonanza, it's not really there for the story, but the little bit of story it does add is, I guess, interesting, sort of. I mean, it's It's a 3D Mario story, but it's Donkey Kong. I mean, that's it's not really the greatest. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, I don't care for the most part. Like stories in video games are generally just not something I care about. I mean, there are certain situations like I do kind of like it in some JRPGs. I do kind of like it in some like like there's the certain like Sony like behind the back third person thing. Like the story is kind of nice sometimes in those kind of games, but I don't really need it per se. I feel like some of those games could work without a story. And at the end of the day, the best games are games that could work without a story. And sometimes that means they don't have one. And other times they do have one, but even if the story wasn't there, they would still be pretty good because of the mechanics. That's generally what I feel. So, a lot of games just don't need a story, and a lot of the ones that do don't need it. Or a lot of the ones that do have it just don't need it. So I don't know, but that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, there are some games that like The Last of Us. The first Last of Us game, I did kind of like that. And I am interested in playing the second one. So, I can get behind some story every now and then, but I'm not really taking any points off for not having a story, or at least much of a story. It's not really something I care about. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as Bonanza. I don't have a whole lot else to say. I really need to sit down for next episode because I'm probably going to have beat it next episode. I probably won't have 100%ed it because I have like 570 some bananas and I've got a couple more worlds and I also have to get the fossils too. But I think there are, from what I looked up, there are like 700 some or something like that. Or maybe there is 999 based on buying stuff with coins. I'm not really entirely sure. I'm a little confused as to how many bananas there are, but there's quite a few bananas for sure. So I'm gonna try to get them all, or at least try to get like 999. See if that's the top. If that's not the top, well, maybe I'll have to get some more. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. Um, but yeah, I mean, all in all, fantastic game. Like I said, I'll have to compile some thoughts and stuff for next time because I'll have beaten it probably, unless something goes horribly wrong. I'll probably have beaten Bonanza, but I won't have 100%ed it. Probably won't have 100%ed it for a few more weeks at least. Maybe not. Maybe I'll keep just holding on to it for a little while. Obviously, by the end of the year, I want to have it 100%ed for sure, but it might just be something I continue to slow roll, jeez, stroll slow roll for like a long time. That may end up being the case. We'll see what happens. But that's probably all I'm gonna say about Bonanza for this episode. But yeah, like I said, I'll definitely have more to say next episode and in the following couple. So I'll briefly touch on the Dragon Drive thing. So I was out of state up until just a couple of days ago. I was gone. I'm not really going to get into the specifics as to why, but it was an unexpected thing that happened. So, I wasn't really expecting to be out of state, and I had planned to try to play some of the Dragon Drive Global Jam. There were three of them. What was it? Two on Saturday, or one on Friday, two on Saturday, I think is how it was working. And so I managed to play a little bit of the morning Saturday session. However, I did not have Wi-Fi because I wasn't getting good data reset. I don't. There wasn't Wi-Fi where I was, or I wasn't connected to it. There might have been, but I wasn't connected to it, and I couldn't connect to it until later. Um, and I didn't have very good data, so I wasn't able to make a hotspot. Or I made a hotspot, but it wasn't good enough to actually play the game. I did manage to download the game off the hotspot, and I managed to open it up and do the tutorial. So I didn't manage to actually do any online matchmaking, which is kind of the point, right? So I don't, it's a little weird that I'm like, oh, I played some Dragon Drive, but I really didn't. I just played the tutorial. But I at least got an idea for the mechanics and how well they were going to work, because this is the first time I'm managing, or I'm able to control this game. Because obviously, we saw it back in April at the Switch 2 presentation, and I know some people went to the Switch 2 experience thing to try it out, but obviously I wasn't one of those people. So, for me, this is the first time experiencing it, and I think for the majority of people, this is the first time experiencing it, unless, of course, they haven't experienced it yet, even, and they're going to wait till the game comes out, which, at this point, it's only a day, so it's really not a big deal. And yeah, that's cool, whatever, props to you, do whatevs, who cares. But yeah, I just figured I'd try out the Global Jam. I thought I was going to be able to do some online matches, but it just would not work, and so I just kind of, I was just kind of done after just doing this tutorial. But I guess I can speak on, the movement and how fluid it felt. And I guess I should say specifically, there were a lot of people I saw online complaining about how it doesn't really feel all that great to move around, how it can be a little bit cumbersome, a little bit difficult sometimes to kind of get the hang of. And on some level, I do feel that, but honestly, by the end of the tutorial area, I was pretty confidently and comfortably moving around the area that I was in, and I was doing pretty decently. And I feel like if I bought this game, which I think I will, if I bought this game, I'm pretty sure that if I was playing it a lot, within a week or so, I would probably have it down. I don't think I'd be good, but I would at least, figure it out enough to play the game, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm off, maybe I'm crazy on this, I don't know. Um, but that's kind of just the general thoughts I felt about the game. So, like I said, I would have loved to do some online matchmaking. I know, like I said, I know some people lots of people were able to do that. I did watch a couple live streams of people doing online matchmaking, and it seemed interesting. It's one of those things where, just like any online game, when they do one of these things, like a pre-release demo or whatever, or when they actually do the release, if there hasn't been a pre-release demo, everybody sucks, So that's kind of I'm not a big fan of online games, but that is the time to play an online game, is when it's new, because that's when people are going to suck, and that's when you have the best chance of actually doing well. Once you wait, several months at this point now, people are going to be good, they're going to know what they're doing, you're just going to get slapped, unless you also know what you're doing. But, with something like, especially like this, where the controls are so weird and wacky, you definitely want to be there at the beginning if you're going to be there at all. So I would say, if you have interest in playing Drag and Drive at all, I would say do it when the game comes out, or at least close to when the game comes out. Is probably the best strategy, because that way I think it'll be most enjoyable, because you'll be in the same position as everybody else, and hopefully you'll do all right. I'm not going to promise you'll be winning, but at the very least, it won't. I don't feel like you'll be getting as slapped around as you could be later on. So that's just kind of how I was feeling with Drag and Drive. Drag and Drive is a cool little thing. It's neat, it's a neat little thing. I don't know. I'm kind of debating between getting it and just waiting till Kirby and the Forgotten Land, because I said I wasn't gonna get it. Now I'm thinking I might get it. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm still not sure. I might just wait till September. I don't know. I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting at this point. It's like, what else? What's there to do? Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Drag and Drive. If I do decide to pick up Drag and Drive, I'll play a little bit of that in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, I'll continue to play Bananza. Well, actually, either way, I'll continue to play Bananza. I'll possibly go back to Yakuza 0. I do need to get back to that for reasons we'll talk about later. Um, and, I don't know. Maybe I'll get back to some stuff on PS5 and stuff. And there's a lot of stuff I've got to finish up that I've just been sitting on for months at this point. So I'm in a bit of a weird spot. But I also need to make some YouTube videos and stuff. So it's a bit of a weird situation. I think that's probably all I'm going to say for this opening segment. I know that was pretty long a segment, but I think we're going to take a quick music break, and we'll be back to talk about a handful of news headlines and stuff that I picked out. But actually, before that, now that I'm thinking about it, I'll actually do it before. We're going to talk about the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase that we got in the last 2 weeks, and also the Indie World Showcase. There were two of them. They did the Partner Showcase on July 31st. Of course, I was in the camp of people that were saying there was definitely going to be a Direct in July, and there technically was. there was a Partner Showcase on the last day, so it's almost like Nintendo heard all the people online. They're like, you know what? Let's troll them, It's almost how that felt. And then also there was the Indie World Direct on the 7th of this month, so that was just last week. So I'll talk about both of those. I have quite a bit to say about the Partner Showcase, but not nearly as much to say about the Indie World. But that's also because there was really just not nearly as much at the Indie World. That's all right. We'll talk about that stuff, and then, like I said, there's going to be a few news headlines as well. Not as many as most weeks, but there's going to be a few. So let's play some music, and we'll be right there. We'll be right back. welcome on back to the second segment, or also the final segment of this here show, episode 25 of Not Just Nintendo. Like I mentioned in the last segment, this last week we had two Nintendo Directs, technically, because one of them was an indie world, one of them was a partner showcase, so neither of them were, like, actual full-blown, like, full-on, like, what we were hoping for kind of Nintendo Directs, which is unfortunate, but, at least we got something, right? I mean, I'll take anything at this point. The good news is, I was thinking about it today because, I was actually listening to another podcast, and they were talking about how, well, you know what, it kind of sucks that we got Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase and Indie World instead, and I guess we'll just have to wait till September for the big one, because we're probably going to have a big one in September, whether it's a Mario Anniversary Direct or it's just a general Direct where they actually talk about games for next year, because so far things aren't looking like there's a whole lot going on. And I was like, yeah, I guess we just have to wait till September. And then I was sitting there, I was like, wait a minute. It almost is September. So it's like, okay, I guess we actually don't have to wait really long at all. The next episode will be on August 26th. Since we're doing this bi-weekly. Or I guess it's not actually the 20. No, it is the 26th. Yeah, it is the 26th. So, yeah, this is, I will say that is the one downside, I think, to doing episodes every 2 weeks, is that it feels like, you almost, like, here to episode 50 is now gonna be, like, a full year instead of half a year. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a little weird how things work like that. Like, I don't know. But anyways. That's all right. It definitely makes things move a little bit slower, but at least then I have time to catch up. But yes, so for this segment, as I mentioned in the last segment, we're going to talk about the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. Each announcement in order. I'm going to have some thoughts on each one. Not a ton on some of them, but a little bit on each one. And then we'll talk about the Indie World presentation, which honestly, I don't know if I have thoughts on everything, but I'll at least name everything. And then we'll be done with that, and we'll do some news headlines and articles and stuff. And then we'll be done for the show. So it's looking like this show is going to be pretty good length, so that's at least nice. So let's talk about the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. So this was on July 31st. I actually did not watch this live exactly. I was going to be a little bit busy. Honestly, I don't even remember exactly. It's been a while now. I don't actually remember exactly what I had going on the morning of this showcase. What actually did I have going on? Honestly, I have no clue. Well, anyways, I had something going on. It was starting at 9, so I wasn't gonna be able to watch it. But then I actually did end up being able to watch like most of it, so most of it live. So anyways, it's a mess, but I did go back through and rewatch it the other day, so I'm caught up and I have it in front of me so I don't miss any announcements. But yes, we're gonna talk about everything in here. So the show opened up. Well, I mean, it opened up with its intro, but the show actually opened up with Monster Hunter Stories 3. So obviously, a lot of people are pretty familiar with Monster Hunter. I'm in the camp of people that hasn't played Monster Hunter, but Monster Hunter Stories, at least, is a bit of a different thing. Rather than a regular Monster Hunter game, it's like a action RPG or like I don't know. It's like a more traditional RPG. So Monster Hunter Stories, first one was on the 3DS, and then I think the second one was on Switch, but they also remastered the first one and they put them out together on Switch. So now we're getting the third one on Switch too, so that's pretty cool. I believe this is the first time they've talked about it. I don't think Bandai Namco's talked about this anywhere else, but I could be wrong. Either way, though, we had Monster Hunter 3, that's coming out. I've not played the Monster Hunter Stories games, but I do kind of plan to. They're definitely on my list of RPGs to play, because they're pretty traditional, and I don't think they're terribly long, either. And they're just another established series of JRPGs, and I want to play through, like, most of those, or any of the ones I can, at least. So this game is coming out in 2026, and that is generally a theme for a lot of these games. Many of them are coming out in 2026. So yeah, we had Monster Hunter, then we had a little graphic talking about, how some of the games are going to be for Switch 2, some of them are going to be for Switch 1. And so, they were just talking about that. Then we got into the second game, which was also a Bandai Namco game. This time, Once Upon a Katamari. So Katamari is, of course, the weird guy with the rectangular head that rolls things around. And yeah, I'd say it's a decently enough of a popular game series at this point. But I don't believe we've gotten a Katamari game in quite a while. And I will say, Katamari seems like an interesting thing, but it also doesn't seem like the kind of thing that I'd actually want to play because there's not a whole lot of game there, you know? It's just like there's not a whole lot of game there, you know. I don't really have much to say about Katamari. I'm not really much of an expert with it. This game's coming out on October 24th of this year. On Switch though, not on Switch 2. So I don't know if it's going to also be on Switch 2 or if it's just going to be on Switch and you can play it on Switch 2. I don't know. But whatever the case, I mean obviously you could play it on Switch 2. But whatever the case, it's a Switch 1 game rather than a Switch 2 game. So that's cool, whatever. I don't know if we've heard about this before, honestly. I really couldn't tell you. I don't think so. The next thing was Just Dance 2026. All right, next. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, I really don't have much to say about it. It's the latest Dragon Ball fighter. Yeah, I mean, I don't personally have any sort of attachment to it, but it is one of those things that, it's good to have some third party support from more recent games. I believe this game just came out last year, so it's not super old or anything. So it's good to have stuff that's, pretty recent coming over to the platform, and there's definitely more of that stuff coming. So, um, that's we'll skip over that though. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. The next thing was a bit of a weird announcement. This is not really something I expected to see. That game is Plants vs. Zombies Replanted. So this, of course, is the first Plants vs. Zombies game replanted. It's a remake of the first game. I don't think this is something that necessarily needed done. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with the first game, but you know what? They might as well remake it. The second and third one, they look pretty good, so they might as well go ahead and remake it. I'm not somebody who's played a lot of these games. I know I used to watch when I was like pretty little. I used to watch Let's Plays of the first two games. The third one didn't exist back then, but the first one, and then when I got a little bit older, but I was still young enough to be watching Let's Plays, the second one had come out, and so I watched a little bit of that. And I actually played quite a bit of both of them myself on mobile phone for a while. I mean, I was never really. Oh, actually, to be fair, I used to play actually a lot of mobile games. To be fair, I used to, when I was very little, I played a lot of mobile games, and nowadays I don't quite as much. But, anyways, Plants vs Zombies, it's kind of an interesting thing. I think it's a well made kind of thing. It's something that a lot of people like, but I don't think it's something a whole lot of people talk about anymore. I know Plants vs Zombies has kind of tried to cling on to life. They had the second and third one that came out, and then they had the Garden Warfare series, and they had Battle for Neighborville, which was pretty recent. But yeah, there's just not really been a ton of popularity behind the series, I don't think, in recent years. But it at least has some recognizability, so I think it's a neat thing for them to be remaking, and I don't know, I don't know if it's just on the eShop for like a few dollars or something, I could possibly see myself playing it at some point. The next game we have EA Sports FC 26 next. All right, Pac-Man World 2 Repack. So this is another Bandai Namco game. So far we've got EA and Bandai Namco carrying the presentation. Because Plants vs Zombies was EA. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. I don't think that was EA. I think that was Bandai Namco, right? Pretty sure. Yeah, it is. So okay, so we have Monster Hunter Stories, that's Bandai Namco. We have Katamari, that's also Bandai Namco. Just Dance, I guess, was Ubisoft, so not EA. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero was Bandai Namco. Plants vs. Zombies Replanted was EA. And EA Sports FC 26 is EA. And now Pac-Man World 2 Repack is back to Bandai Namco, so a lot of those too. Um, But so Pac-Man World, the Pac-Man World games were back on the original PlayStation. They were just more mascot platformers that came after like Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot. More of those kind of games. I know a lot of people back then said they weren't too good. But they did remake Pac-Man One World Repack or Pac-Man World. Pac-Man World? Yeah, Pac-Man World Repack came out quite a few years ago at this point. I want to say it was like 2020, 2021. And I've kind of been wanting to play it ever since then. I was like, I've heard this game isn't very good, but I still want to play it. I will say I do kind of wish that the first one was a Switch 2 edition game, but at the same time, I mean, I'm not even going to hold out because I highly doubt they're ever going to make a Switch 2 version of the first Pac-Man World. I don't think that's really something people are clamoring for. But yeah, it is pretty cool that they're putting out the second one, and that might actually promote me to go ahead and play the first one, because I have been kind of wanting to play the Pac-Man World game. So this might be my jumping on point, but I would probably start with the first one at least. Alright, so Square Enix made its first appearance. Next up, we have Final Fantasy Tactics, the Evilus, or however you say that, Chronicles. Final Fantasy Tactics X comes out on September 30th, and that is actually something I've considered getting, but I don't think I'm going to get it at least on day one. So I could see myself getting it a little bit later, but I'm not really going to, like, rush out to snatch it up. Like, I'm not really... I'm not so bothered about it that I have to get it right away. But Final Fantasy Tactics is probably the most exciting thing from the presentation so far. Not that that's saying a whole lot. I think Pac-Man World 2 Repack was also pretty good. But yeah, I think, Final Fantasy Tactics is a pretty cool thing. A lot of people are going to be interested in that. It's another Square Enix thing. So that's at least cool that that was there. Next up was something that actually made me pretty happy, even though it's not really something I needed. That's Persona 3 Reload on Switch 2. So, as you know, I played Persona 3 Reload earlier this year on the PS5, and honestly, part of me kind of just wishes I would have waited an extra 6 months and, played it on the Switch 2 instead, but of course, I had no idea it was coming to Switch 2. So, and that's alright. I'm not really too mad about it. It is what it is. At the end of the day, I'm actually very happy that this game is coming because having Persona 3 Reload on the Switch 2, I think, says good things about the future of Persona and Atlas games in general on the Switch 2. Of course, as far as Atlas games, we had the Raidu remaster back last month, or was it in June? I can't remember. But anyways, it was a while ago now. We had the Raidu remaster, and then also now we've had Persona 3 Reload. So, Persona 4 Revival, which is probably going to come out next year, hopefully that'll also come out day and date on Switch 2, because that would be great, because then I could play that over there, and I would love to do that. And maybe they'll port over Persona 5, or they'll do another remake of Persona 5. I don't know if they would do that, but they might. Who knows? That would be pretty cool as well. So, I don't know. I'm totally down for, for more Persona. And I'm pretty happy that they're bringing it to Nintendo audiences because I think that's a good thing, and I think that says good things. Even if I don't need Persona 3 on Switch 2, that's definitely good news for me as somebody who wants Persona 4 on Switch 2 if they can put 3 out. So I'm definitely down for that to exist. And, if Persona 3 ends up at like $20 like it was at, on PS5, I might actually consider buying it again just to have it on Switch 2. I want to put it past me. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. So Persona 3, I'm glad that that's coming. I don't actually know. That's coming in October, so that's pretty cool. And another big thing that a lot of people have been talking about for a while now is Metaphor ReFantazio from last year. It was one of the Game of the Year nominees. That's another Atlas game, kind of like Persona, and that's another one that could potentially come over to Switch 2. And so Persona 3 Reload definitely, that coming over definitely makes a good shout for Metaphor. So I'm definitely happy about that because I would love to play Metaphor on Switch 2. I'd love to play Persona 4 and even probably 5 on Switch 2. That'd be great. The next thing, this is actually, I think, the longest trailer of the whole... No, I think it was the second longest trailer of the whole presentation. That was for Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. So, Hyrule Warriors, I do actually kind of want to go back to the Hyrule Warrior games at some point. I played quite a bit of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, probably 10, 12 hours, something like that. But my problem is, because of the map, maybe I just have some crazy OCD or something, I don't know. But on the map in the Hyrule Warriors game, it's like every time you complete a mission, it marks on the map. And every time you spend resources that you get from completing missions and trade them, it also marks on the map. And so I got to a point where I was like, I need to fill out the map. But filling out the map in Hyrule Warriors is a crazy, ridiculous task that nobody should put themselves through. And so here I am, I need to fill out the map, but I also was like, I don't want to fill out the map. And so, I was trying to fill out the map, and I ended up getting burnt out on the game because I was just not making any real progress in the game because I was slow rolling it so much. So I think at some point I'm going to try to go back to probably the first one and not worry about getting everything on the map and make a conscious effort to only get what I naturally get and not redo anything just for stuff on the map. And that way I can hopefully not burn out on it and I can play through the 3 games. But I'm not really planning to do that anytime too soon, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I do see myself playing this game at some point, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, but it's not really something I need right now. And to be honest, I've really actually heard a lot of the same opinions online. I don't think there's really anybody that I've heard that's like, oh my gosh, Hyrule Warriors? You know, I think most people at this point are getting a little sick of Hyrule Warriors. And honestly, I wouldn't really be shocked if we never see another Hyrule Warriors again. I think there's a good chance this is the last one, especially if it doesn't sell well. So we'll see what happens. I don't know, but Hyrule Warriors is a kind of a neat thing at least, so I'm down for it existing still. Of course, we had EA Sports Madden NFL 26. We'll skip that. Chillin' by the Fire. Chillin' by the Fire. That's a game that I don't know who made this game, but it obviously looks like an indie game. I think it's the kind of game that probably should have been in the Indie World presentation instead. And as people rightfully pointed out online, the entire reason why Chilling by the Fire was in the partner showcase was because it uses the Switch 2 camera and the Switch 2 mouse controls. And so Nintendo's like, ooh, look at this! You know, we have a partner out here using the camera, using the motion controls. This is the kind of amazing feature you could have if you were a partner on the Switch 2. That's kind of what they're trying to do. And, you know, Chilling by the Fire looks lame. I don't think anybody thinks this game looks cool. It's stupid looking. I don't know who would ever want to play this game. um, well, watch one of the developers from the game be watching my video and being like, oh man, ouch, you know, like, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it's a, it's a game. It's a game, yeah. It's a game. I don't really know what else to say about it. Chilling by the Fire, it looks kind of lame. I have no interest in ever playing that. Next up, Apex Legends. I'm not like a first-person shooter guy, nor am I really a online multiplayer guy. But at least something like Apex Legends is pretty cool for it to be coming to Switch 2. Because I know the first game specifically had a lot of problems on Switch 1. Like, it wasn't something that, that ran very well or anything. So a lot of people had a lot of problems with the first game, so I definitely think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very beneficial that the second one, not the second one, not the first game, the second game, or not the first game, second game, but the first version on Switch 1 and now the version on Switch 2. I think it's very beneficial that they had a little bit of both of those. The next game is a game that I think has been out for a little while, but I had just heard about it at this partner showcase. That game is Hella. It is looks like you play as a mouse, but it's a co-op thing. So, you know, it looks kind of neat, honestly. I kind of like the gameplay. Or maybe it is now. Yeah, I don't think it is out, actually. Maybe they announced it for this, but Hella looks kind of cool. It's another 3D platformer, but a co-op one, kind of like a Split Fiction or something like that. And it seems like the kind of thing that I'd be down to play, but again, I don't really have people that I play, you know, multiplayer games with, per se. So, like, something like It Takes Two or Split Fiction, I just skip because it's just not the kind of game that I have people to play with. I could see myself at some point trying to play some of those games, especially like the Triforce Heroes games, like Triforce Heroes and Triforce Warriors. I could see myself trying to play the Triforce Adventures or whatever. I could see myself trying to play those at some point, but I just don't see myself trying to play something like Hella. But it does look pretty cool, you know, as somebody who's probably not going to play it. Next game in the partner showcase was Star Wars Outlaws. Star Wars Outlaws is one that we've been expecting for a little while. I know a lot of people expected it to be announced back in the April presentation. Actually, wait, I think maybe it was announced in the April presentation, now that I'm thinking about it. And that game comes out pretty soon, on September 4th. I'm gonna wait and hear what people have to say about Outlaws on the Switch 2, because I am a Star Wars fan. I know a lot of people didn't think Outlaws was very good, but I'm kind of down to try Outlaws on the Switch 2, potentially, you know, just see if it's any good, or definitely try to hear some opinions on how good the version is. That's kind of what I'd want to hear. Next game we had Chronos: The New Dawn. This game is by Bloober. So this game we first heard about back at Summer Games Fest, I want to say. It's a weird looking horror-ish like FPS game, where you have this like weird like fish tank looking helmet. I don't know much about it. I'm sure some people do, but I just really am not interested. It's a kind of an interesting looking thing, but it just really has not gotten me, you know, thinking about it. I'm like, whatever. The next one, though, this is probably my personal favorite announcement of the bunch. This is what I'm most happy about. That, of course, is Yakuza Kiwami 1 and 2. So Yakuza Kiwami 2 was announced first. Now, here's the thing with Yakuza. Like I said, I'm trying to get into the series. I've been playing Yakuza 0. But Yakuza Kiwami did come out on Switch 1 years ago. So technically that was already out. So they put out Kiwami 2 now. That's the next one in the series. But they also said in this partner showcase that Kiwami 2 will come out, but Kiwami 1 will also come out as a Switch 2 edition, and that'll be a separate thing. So I think you'll be able to buy them standalone physically, but if you want to buy them digitally, you can save a bunch of money by buying them as a bundle. So personally, I'm probably just going to buy them independently physically because I want them physically. But, you know, most normal people could just buy them digitally as a bundle and call it a day. But yeah, that's Yakuza definitely something I want to keep playing through, and I am happy that it's only been a few months and we've already gotten the next one announced. So it does seem like they're going to roll out these Yakuza games pretty quickly. So that's nice because I would definitely like to have the whole series available on the Switch too. That would be awesome. They showed a little bit of footage of like Shinobi. They showed Goodnight Universe, which is a weird like indie looking thing. I don't know, it's like a point and click looking thing. They showed NBA Bounce. They showed Hello Kitty Island Adventure Switch 2 edition. They showed Romancing Saga 2, the remake. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Another RPG that I might play at some point. They showed Shinobi Art of Vengeance. I think I just said that, but yeah, Shinobi is definitely an interesting looking game. I think it's like a Metroidvania kind of thing though, and I'm still trying to get into Metroidvanias. I want to try to play all the Metroid games and then all the Castlevania games before I try to get into any other Metroidvanias. So I'm kind of on hold with that stuff, but I will at some point go ahead and probably play stuff like Shinobi. So I'm definitely happy to see that that's coming over. They briefly showed Borderlands 4. And then we got into the two, I would say, biggest announcements of the whole bunch. They're not my two favorites. I think, Yakuza Kiwami and maybe Star Wars Outlaws were my favorites, but these are definitely pretty high up there as well. So we got two Square Enix RPGs, both HD 2D. The first one is a brand new game. I guess they're kind of both new games, but the first one is totally new, and this game is called The Adventures of Elliot, The Millennium Tales, which is the longest, most unnecessary title for an RPG I think I've ever heard. But the gameplay looks interesting, so for anybody who hasn't seen this, I would recommend looking up a trailer. They showed tons and tons of gameplay for this announcement here in this direct. But yeah, this is another Square Enix RPG. It's an action combat one. It's not a turn-based one. Personally, I would prefer a turn-based one, but I'm okay with an action one. This is actually the kind of game that I might want to play at some point. I haven't played a ton of Square Enix RPGs, but the ones I've played, I've enjoyed. So I'm definitely down to play more of that stuff. But I do probably need to get away and play some stuff before I go buying any more RPGs. Like there's a lot of stuff I need to get through. So I probably should reprioritize. That said, I might not reprioritize when Octopath Traveler 0 comes out, because that's the other HD2D game Square Enix announced. So Octopath Traveler 0, I take it, is some sort of prequel to Octopath Traveler 1 and 2. I heard that it's reusing assets from a mobile game that I think exists, and I think it's also reusing some characters and stuff. I've heard some people kind of having some backlash against that. Personally, I don't really mind that much because I haven't played the mobile game. Now, if it ends up being so similar that people that have played it have a bad experience, that would be kind of annoying. But, I mean, for me, I'm like, whatever, I haven't played the mobile game. I don't really care how similar it is to the mobile game. It doesn't really bother me. So, that's cool. I think it's smart that they're reusing assets and stuff. So, that's cool if that's what they want to do. That's what they want to do. I'm not going to judge. But, I will definitely say that not Dragon Quest, Octopath Traveler 0 is an interesting idea, and, Octopath Traveler is yet another RPG series that I've kind of wanted to get into for quite a while now. I have the second one, but I was like, at some point here, I'm going to have to play through both the first and the second one. So I'll definitely do that at some point, but now that Octopath Traveler 0 exists, at some point when I get around to it, I can play through Octopath Traveler 0, and then Octopath Traveler 1, and then 2. and that'll be fun to get through at some point. But I don't think I'm gonna grab Octopath like as soon as it comes out, but it's definitely the kind of thing that I'll want to probably play like next year or something because that's a pretty cool announcement, I feel. And that is it for the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. I guess now we can get into the indie world, which I have significantly less to say about. Number one, because it was so much shorter of a game, but also because I'm less knowledgeable on each of the games, and because I don't know, there were just less games talked about. The few that were talked about for longer, and the Direct was also shorter to begin with. So there were just really just not a whole lot going on in this Indie Direct or Indie World presentation. So I'll talk about it briefly, but I probably won't have a whole lot to say. And I guess as before we get into that, my final closing thought on the partner showcase, I heard a lot of people online on other podcasts and stuff say that the partner showcase wasn't very good. It felt like an end of life partner showcase for a console where it should be the beginning of life. And on some level I can kind of understand, but at the same time, I actually think the partner showcase was great. We got a lot of big announcements, specifically from like Square Enix. There were some small things like Pac-Man World and that stuff, but there was a lot of stuff up my alley, but there was also just a lot of stuff that even if I wasn't necessarily looking to play on Switch 2, I think it was a good thing for it to be there because it meant that, other things could potentially come. So, overall, I think this was actually a very good partner showcase. Honestly, I think it might be the best partner showcase that I remember, at least. I can't really think of a better one. I would think if there was a better one, it would have stuck out to me. But usually showcases aren't very good. Now, I would have preferred if this was a regular Nintendo Direct, and if perhaps a few of these things were, mixed in, right? Um, maybe not some of the maybe not chilling by the fire, but some of the things, bigger things, could have been mixed in there. I think would have been better, and we could have had some actual big announcements. But oh well. I think these are decently big enough for a partner showcase, and on some level, it does feel a little weird that we had no big summer presentation. But I'm sure we'll have something in September. That's usually how things go. So, and that's not really that far off at this point. All right, so the Indie World presentation. They opened the Indie World presentation after the intro with Mina the Hollower. So Mina the Hollower is the latest game by Yacht Club Games. So for those who don't know, Yacht Club Games, they made Shovel Knight, back on like the Wii U and 3DS and PS4, and back in those days, back in ancient times, they made Shovel Knight. And I actually haven't played Shovel Knight, but Shovel Knight is a platformer with a knight with a shovel. Um, and it's basically, it's in a retro style. It's meant to look like an NES game. Um, so, a lot of people loved Shovel Knight back then. A lot of people still love Shovel Knight today. It's definitely one of those indies that really has stuck out with a lot of people. I mean, it's in the same boat as games like Inside or Grease, Ori and the Blind Forest, Hades, Celeste. It's one of those like really popular, really well loved indie games, and for good reason. From what I've seen, again, I haven't played it myself, but from what I've seen, it seems like it's for pretty good reason. So, Mina the Howler, I know a lot of people were very excited about this game back when it was announced. I believe it was announced in the Switch 2 presentation, right? I'm pretty sure that's when it was announced. Um, so that's pretty exciting, I guess, for lots and lots of people. And that game is supposed to be coming on October 31st, right on Halloween. So that's going to be not too long, really, before that comes out. The next thing was Well Dweller. This looked like, it looks like a Metroidvania. I don't know much about this game. Honestly, this indie world, I didn't watch until a couple days after it happened because I just really just wasn't interested. But this Well Dweller, as far as like Metroidvanias go, it looks actually pretty neat. I'm sure lots of people will enjoy it, but I'm not really, like I said, with Metroidvanias, I want to play all the Metroid games, then all the Castlevania games, and then I'll probably go ahead and get into some of the other Metroidvanias and stuff. So, personally, that's just not really what I'm here for. Like then we had Neverway. Neverway, if it's a top-down thing, it looks like parts of it are farming sim-y, but it looks like parts of it are like horror game-y, and action combat-y. Like, I don't know. There's just a lot going on with Neverway. Honestly, I don't know most of the details. I think we probably need to get some sort of a further announcement on this game because, as it currently stands, I think we pretty much know nothing. But it is coming next year, so I'm sure there's going to be some time to, to get that sorted out. The next game is called Herding, and as you can probably expect, the game is literally about herding. So you're just like this dude with a stick, um, running behind some sheep and cows and all sorts of livestock. I don't really, I don't know what else you're supposed to say about this game. It's a herding game, I guess. If that's really what you're into. That comes out a week from tomorrow, actually, so it's very, very soon that that comes out. Next game, Is This Seat Taken? It's another top-down thing, and I think you're pretty much, from what it seemed like to me, you're pretty much there's a bunch of people, and there's X amount of seats, and there's enough people for each seat, but you have to figure out a way. Like there might be somebody that's like already in a seat, and you've got to find a way to put people with who they want to be with, while still having room for other people. So I don't know all the details, but anyway, it seems like an interesting kind of concept, but I'm really just not interested. Little Kitty, the Big City, or Little Kitty Big City, sorry, is getting an update. The Picture Perfect, like PURR, update, and that's cool. I don't know, I don't know all the details on this update because I haven't played the original game. So when they talk about it, I'm like, okay, I don't know what's different about this, but something must be different about it. Um, so I don't know, but anyways, we're getting an update for that. It says available this year, which isn't very helpful because this year is actually, pretty far along at this point, but whatevs, right? Next up, they gave us a little content warning before they got into the game called Content Warning. And, to be fair, I'm not really sure this needed a content warning. This is it looks like a co-op kind of indie game. Um, it's by Landfall, but, I don't know, it's a weird, like, horror-y thing, but with co-op and like a Phasmophobia or a I don't know. There's probably more examples that I'm not thinking of. I don't really get into most horror things, but I don't know. It looks kind of vaguely interesting. I'm just really not like super into it. I don't really like I said. I don't play a whole lot of multiplayer stuff. I don't really have people to play multiplayer stuff with, but it does seem kind of interesting, I suppose. Next time we had Ball X Pit, and the trailer for this opened with the director of the game, Kenny's son, with an orange, or not an orange, I don't know what fruit that is that he has on his head, like an apple or something on his head, which is definitely an interesting and unique way to open a trailer, and so I can respect that. Ball X Pit, as he said, is inspired by games like Vampire Survivors. It looks sort of mobile gamey, and I'm not really saying that as like a something negative about it. I mean, it seems like an interesting idea, but at the end of the day, this does seem like a mobile game kind of thing, but it seems like the kind of thing that's a mobile game, but because it's on console, there was a little bit more thought put into it. So that's definitely good, but it's just at the end of the day, it really is mobile gaming. Next up, we had Ultimate Sheep Raccoon. I have no idea where that title came from. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it's like I don't know. It almost looks like an Ali Ali or something like that. You're tricking off ramps and stuff on like a scooter or a bike or something. I don't know what exactly you're on, but something like that. And you kind of traverse through the levels. And I'm not entirely sure if this is going to be multiplayer only or if there's going to be single player as well. I don't know all the details. I'm sure we'll get more details. It's coming out this winter, apparently. The next game was called Glaciered. This is definitely a underwater diving game for sure. This time you're not really diving; you're like a weird sea creature. I don't know if the sea creature actually exists. If it does, then I'd love to see it because that's a crazy looking sea creature. I don't know. I think they probably made it up for the game. But anyways, you're underwater diving, kind of like a Beyond Blue, like I talked about earlier this year, or like an Endless Ocean Luminous that I didn't talk about because I didn't play it. Sort of like that kind of thing. But I mean, I don't know. It's I guess it's not quite like that kind of thing because it's also there's combat, action combat and stuff, battling the fish. So that's actually kind of neat. I'm definitely down. I don't think I'm gonna play it, but I don't know. I could see myself playing it at some point. It's a pretty neat idea. All right, next up we had Winter Burrow. This was by a studio called Noodle Cake. which is definitely a weird one. You play as a rat. It's a top-down thing. I don't know. Again, I don't know all the details. I've said that a lot. They only showed a few seconds of it. Undusted level letters from the past. This is a cleaning game. It's like one of those. Um, I don't know. They'll give you an object and it's dirty, and you've got to use some tools to clean it off. I don't know. What I mean, there's lots of games like that. Tiny Bookshop. It's a like 2D thing. You have a bunch of books, and I think you basically just have to pick out the right book for people based on their tastes and stuff. And you can customize your bookshop, and I don't know, cool. I have like I don't know. Caves of Khud. This looks like one of those like old 2D like top-down RPGs, and do mean old. I mean like Ultima kind of old. That's kind of how I took this. It was like an old like computer RPG, so um like an Ultima or like that kind of thing. So I don't know why you would ever want to play this unless you're just super nostalgic for Ultima or something. But I guess if you want to. It's gonna be out this year, I believe, right? So I guess if that's what you're into. Next up, Strange Antiquities. This one, it's sort of a similar thing to like the bookshop. It's like you're looking for. I think you collect like artifacts, but again, we got like 5 seconds of this. What I took it to mean is that you like kind of collect these artifacts, and then people come in and they're looking for something or something. I don't know. Again, we didn't get much time on this. Opus Prison Break. I don't know. It's a game. There's a cat. You're looking around and first person. You're running around. There's some animals. I don't know. That's all we got. Sometimes they get into this with the indie worlds and stuff. They don't really show you a whole lot of content on a lot of these things. Go Go Town. You can customize your character, and it's like a farming sim, but you can also like customize your house. I don't know, like The Sims or something. And then here is something that I was specifically happy about. That is UFO 50. So for those who don't know, UFO 50, this game has been out a couple of years now, but it was only on Steam until just 5 days ago. But UFO 50 is basically it's like a celebration. Like they have like Atari 50, right? It's that kind of thing, but for a fake company. So they made up a company for the game as if they were, an early video game company, and they've been going until today. And so there's 50 games. Some of them are back, NES kind of graphics, Atari 2600 kind of graphics even. And then some of them are up to more modern looking stuff. I don't know exactly how far it goes because I haven't played the game, but I know they get to look a little bit more modern at least. So again, I don't know everything about this game, but it's that kind of thing. Where yeah, it's actually a really cool idea, and I've wanted to play it for a long time, but it was like $25 and it was only on Steam. So now that it's on Switch too, as soon as it gets like a big discount, I'm gonna buy it. So I don't know how long that'll be. It could be 2 months from now. It could be next year. It could be 2 or 3 years from now. I don't really know, but that's kind of where I'm at with this game. Seems cool. I'd like to play it at some point. I don't know if I'll really have the chance to anytime soon. So that was it for the Indie World presentation. There really wasn't a whole lot talked about at the Indie World presentation. I would say the partner showcase was way better. I think they probably should have given us a bunch of information on Silksong at the Indie World. I know that a lot of people have said, oh, well, Silksong won't be in the Indie World. They'll want to put that in a main direct or in a partner showcase or something. And I can see why, because it is a big deal. But at the same time, they needed something for this Indie World to get people to actually, like, be invested. Because really, at the end of the day, there just wasn't a whole lot going on. So I don't really know. Mina the Hollower was definitely the big thing that I think the most people cared about, but it was also right at the beginning. So I think this was a very front-loaded thing. Um, and yeah, I don't think really anything else was really too big. I mean, usually you want something pretty big in the middle too. I guess content warning was maybe exciting for some people because it's kind of a multiplayer horror thing. Those have really blown up in the last few years. And then right at the end, I guess announcing UFO 50 coming to Switch 2. That's kind of neat, but it's not a new game, you know what I mean? So it's definitely like I don't think they spaced out the announcements very well, but at the same time, they really couldn't possibly have because they just didn't have enough announcements. I don't know. So I guess we're going to do a few news articles here. So apparently, there might be a sequel to Metaphor Refundazio. I guess there was a survey from Atlas, an online consumer survey, and the questions were focused mainly on which games the fan base plays or intends to purchase. But there was one question that asked if fans would be interested in a new game or sequel for a few different series. So it talks about Etrian Odyssey, Persona, and SMT. But it also was asking about Metaphor. I'm reading this basically off Game Rant. So that, obviously that doesn't mean for sure anything that anything's happening, but that definitely sort of implies or suggests that there could be a sequel to Metaphor. I always expected there to be a sequel to Metaphor. I think they're going to do it as a third pillar for the Persona, SMT, and now Metaphor, kind of stuff. I think it's just going to be another one of those. And they're going to rotate between them. Or not rotate really, because I think that the teams they overlap some, but I think they're also a little different, I believe, unless I'm totally wrong on that. Um, but anyways, so it definitely those three I think are all going to coexist. So I don't know. I imagine if we are going to get another metaphor, it's not going to be for at least I don't know 3 years. Like I don't think they're going to really get anything out super quickly, especially if they are working on this Persona 4 revival and Persona 6 and stuff. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Maybe I'll be surprised. But I would like for Metaphor to, be ported to Switch 2 first. Obviously, I'd love to, be up to date on that. I did have an idea though. I actually got this from another podcast I listened to, but they were talking about how, for Persona games, they usually like to put out another version of them a little bit later. So, at least in the last two, right? So they had Persona 4, and then shortly later they put out Persona 4 Golden, and then they put out Persona 5, and then shortly later they put out Persona 4 Royal. So I was thinking, or they were thinking, I took this from this Nintendo Life. I did not come up with this, but they were talking about how potentially they could, put out another version of Metaphor, and that's their excuse to put it on Switch 2. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm definitely down for that because I would love to have Metaphor on Switch 2. All right, next up, there's a job listing from Naughty Dog that is uh, suggesting that there could be a trailer soon for Intergalactic. Intergalactic was announced, was it? I think it was last year. Yeah, last year at the Game Awards. So Game Awards 2024. It's been almost a year now, I guess. It's been quite a while. Yeah, it was announced in December 2024. But the job listing is looking for a gameplay capture artist who can create video and still image assets for use in public facing campaigns, in quotes. So obviously, it mentions that it's a temporary role. So obviously this is definitely suggesting that there is going to be some sort of trailer. Whether there's going to be one soon, who knows? But I would assume they want to get anybody too early, so I actually personally I think that we're gonna get this at the Game Awards this year. I think they're gonna talk about it again at the Game Awards. I guess it's possible it's at just a random state of play as well, but personally I do think they're gonna talk about this at the Game Awards because this is probably gonna be a pretty big announcement. I don't know if we'll get a release date then, or if it'll just be like, hey, we're still working on it, like I don't know. We'll see what happens though. So last week I talked a little bit about the Tencent copy of Horizon and how Sony was suing it, suing Tencent for copying Horizon Zero Dawn because, to be honest, yes, the two games look very similar. I will say one thing that does frustrate me is when the Pokemon Company tried to sue Pal World or Pocket Pair for Pal World because Pal World was an obvious ripoff and clone of Pokemon. Everybody over the internet was all freaking out. Oh my gosh, how could they do that? That's so terrible. It's not the same game. Blah 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 blah. Right? But now, as soon as Sony goes to sue Tencent over the copy of Horizon, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Whatever. It looks the same." I'm like, freaking what a double standard we have. I mean, this is ridiculous. But anyways, I guess my point is, this game, Light of Mortarom or whatever, has been removed from the Steam page. Now, I don't think this means that it's gonna not exist. I think they're gonna continue to make it, but I think they're gonna like change it up. So I don't know. I'm guessing that it's gonna be, probably get changed up a little bit so it doesn't look quite a lot like it. Or maybe it's not going to get changed at all and they're just taking it down for a little while to try to clear things up with Sony and then they're going to put it out. I don't know. But it seems like this game is probably going to get delayed for a little while and it's probably going to end up being changed a little bit if it does come out. Alright, this happened like just after the last episode. So it's been about 2 weeks since this came out, but it was Nintendo filed a patent for like a hand crank on the Joy-Con 2, so it's like a thing you can magnetically attach to the Joy-Con 2, and you can have like this weird like hand crank on it. And I think they were doing this mostly for the potential of like a fishing rod. But so, Game Rant also was talking about how this is kind of similar to the Playdate's hand crank. For those who don't know, that the Playdate is a handheld console that's digital only. It's very small and it has no backlight, kind of like a Game Boy. But it's something that's not super popular, I don't think. But the idea is basically you get games every like month or two or something like that. So there'll be different waves of games. I think they're on the fourth wave or something. So if you catch up, then you're out of stuff. You can play all the old stuff, but you don't get anything new until the next like season of Playdate. But if you get a new one, then you've got 4 full months worth of new games every month. So, anyways, it's that kind of idea. But the whole gimmick of the console is they got a hand crank on the side. As well as the buttons and stuff, but the hand crank is used for specific actions in the game. So I don't know. I don't know if that means they're going to put Playdate games on the Switch too. That would be kind of weird, and it would sort of undermine the Playdate. So I'm not really sure why Panic would elect to do that. But Game Rant just said it was a possibility. But also, the hand crank could just be used for like a fishing rod or something in some upcoming game. I don't know exactly all the details, like I said, but it does seem like an interesting idea at least. All right, the ROG Xbox Ally and the ROG Xbox Ally X. So reliable leaker, Dilab Billy Kun. I don't know how to say that, man. I just totally butchered that name. D-Lab. Oh no, he's from D-Lab. Bill Kun. Bill Kun. I don't know how to say that, but anyways, this guy was leaking about the ROG Xbox Ally X. And I guess he says that it's supposed to release on October 16th, 2025, which is very soon. And, part of me is like, well, that's just, like, that's crazy because that's, like, super, that's super soon. Why would they, not give us a release date if it's going to be in 2 months? But at the same time, that does seem like the Xbox and even somewhat PlayStation strategy to have a really short announcement to release cycle. And I think even Nintendo's gotten to the point where just about everything now is a really short announcement to release date cycle. Which, on some level is nice, on some level is probably bad, but it's something we can get into at another point. The point is, ROG Xbox Ally X looks like it's going to come out this year at the end of the year, whether it's on the 16th of October or some other time. It does look like it's going to come out very soon, and it's going to be $45,000. No, I think it was like 700 and 900 or whatever, or maybe 600 and 900, something like that was the leaked price point. I don't know if that's actually official or anything, probably not. But anyways, it's going to be crazy expensive, and it's probably going to come out this year, and I don't see much reason personally to buy it, so I'm not gonna. Alright, also, according to Game Rant, and actually I saw this article from a few places, Nintendo stock is at an all-time high, at least as of 7 hours ago. Stock values for Nintendo have hit 14,355 yen, or $96.98. Analysts expect the stock value to rise further before the end of 2025, they say. Now, of course, I think this is mostly because the Switch 2 just came out, and the Switch 2 is wildly successful. I mean, in its first 4 days, it outsold the Switch in its first month. So, really, it really does seem like the Switch 2 is doing quite well. Obviously, we'll get the full story next year at the end of the fiscal year, like in April. We'll probably hear about the sales. We might even hear before then, but definitely by April, we'll hear about the sales. And then we'll know for sure whether or not it truly did do better than the Switch in its first year. I think I'm on the fence a little bit. It did do better than the Switch in its first month, but I do think it'll do worse in the first year. Because the Switch sold about 15 million. I'm going to guess more like 12 for the Switch 2. So that's still really good, but honestly, I do think I expect it to sell a little bit worse than the Switch 1. There's a little bit less coming out, but also, it's less gimmicky, it's less innovative, it's not as Nintendo-y, and it's also more expensive. Now, I'm not saying it's overpriced. Personally, I think it's well-priced. I don't understand all the people that think it's overpriced, but I do at least understand that it is expensive, right? So it does make sense, at least to me, why somebody would think it's expensive, because that's true, it is expensive. So unlike Nintendo, in the exact opposite boat, Sega's quarter one sales have declined to 22.7%. So they said that net sales for this segment of time, the last few months, performed largely in line with expectations, but the drop in operating income was narrower than expected. So I don't know exactly what's going on with Sega, but I guess they're not doing so well in 2025 so far. So I don't know. I know they've been putting out a lot of stuff on Switch too. I'm very happy with their support, but maybe they're not doing so well. This is an interesting thing that I hadn't even considered. This was a Nintendo Life article. I'm not really going to read any parts of it, but I'm just going to basically say the headline and have my thoughts on it. So where are the Switch 2 soundtracks and Nintendo Music? And that's a good point. You know, Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bananza, they still don't have the soundtracks up on Nintendo Music. I know they also don't have them on the website that I get music from for this podcast, and so I have to actually go download them off YouTube myself, which is pretty annoying. But they're not on the official Nintendo Music app, which is really weird. I don't know why they haven't done it. The Nintendo Music app, they've been really bad about getting soundtracks and stuff on there. I don't understand what's going on. The stuff you expect to see is mostly just the stuff playable on Switch. And they still haven't got a lot of the Switch 2 stuff out. There's still tons of stuff throughout their history that's not out. You have games like Ocarina of Time and stuff, but that's because they're on Switch Online, you know? So oftentimes you'll miss a lot of stuff in between. Like, there's not a whole lot of Wii U games, not a whole lot of Wii games, you know? There's just lots of stuff missing that I don't understand. Like, they should have rolled this thing out with most of these things that have come out. And it seems crazy that of all the things for Nintendo to drip feed to us, because they drip feed like Switch Online titles and all that stuff, and that's cool, whatever. Drip feed all you want. But with freaking soundtracks on a music app, I mean, seriously, you're gonna drip feed soundtracks? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So anyways, it is frustrating that the Switch 2 soundtracks aren't there. It's frustrating that old soundtracks aren't there. But to be honest, I don't use the Nintendo Music app that much anyways. I think it's a great app. I don't listen to a whole lot of music anyway. But I just thought that was an interesting point, and I figured I would reiterate it here. Alright, so I think that's gonna be it for the news and for the partner showcase in the indie world. You know, I am glad we got the partner showcase. The indie world, man, whatever. Who cares? But I am glad we got the partner showcase. That's cool. But at the same time, I do kind of wish that there was a little bit more going on. But overall, I liked the partner showcase. I know a lot of people didn't, but I liked the partner showcase. The indie world, like I said, but that's all right. You know, it's fine. It's not really the end of the world. But I do wish we had an actual regular Nintendo Direct, though, and I guess, to be fair, it's only going to be a couple podcast episodes before we do, it looks like, so that's alright. We'll talk about that, in a month or so, maybe even a little bit more, maybe a month and a half, but we'll talk about that eventually. That'll be exciting. So that's going to do it for the show. I already plugged the Discord earlier and the email. I'll remind of the email. You can email the show with any questions, comments, or concerns, anything you want, at notjustnintendo@gmail.com. That is NOTJUSTNINTENDO@gmail.com. I think you know how to spell all those words. It's not just Nintendo, all put together. And you can email the show with any questions and stuff. Be free to be happy to do that. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm losing my mind. But you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not listening on YouTube. And I have a few YouTube channels, regardless of whether or not you're on YouTube. They are Gininja MC and YT Gininja. They're both in the description. The first one's my Minecraft channel. The second one's my Geography channel. The Geography channel's not super active, but the Minecraft channel, I've been trying to do a lot of stuff over there. It's just recently launched. So that's pretty exciting. So that's kind of what I've been working on a lot of the time. But I'll definitely, in the next 2 weeks, want to play a bunch of Bananza. Maybe I'll go back to Final Fantasy III, but I'm not going to make any promises. I will probably go back to Yakuza, though. So definitely need to get back to some of that stuff. So thanks again for watching, everybody, or listening, I guess. There's not really much to watch, but thanks for listening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Actually, 13 days, because I was late. So I'll see you all next Tuesday. Not next Tuesday. The Tuesday after next, with the new episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.